just to have a look. Maybe I'll like it. The bus left without them, and I didn't have a return ticket. At the reception desk, they asked, "Are you staying, Mrs.?" I smiled and said, "No, I'm just seeing who invited me here." And finally, I went home. Alone, but home. If you're ready for this journey, be sure to hit the subscribe button and like this post so you don't miss any updates. And let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. It's always nice to see where everyone is. Well, hello everyone. I suppose I should introduce myself. My name is Martha, and up until 3 months ago, I was what you'd call a contented woman. I'm 68 years old, I've been married for 45 of them, and I live in a beautiful, paid-off home in a quiet suburb. I have one son, Mark, who is married to a woman named, and I'm not making this up, Brenda. Yes, that kind of Brenda. For 45 years, I wasn't just a wife. I was the household COO. My husband, Richard, ran a moderately successful contracting business. He was the face, the guy who shook hands and made promises. I was the one who, from our little home office, did the payroll, managed the books, paid the taxes, and most importantly, handled all our investments. Richard, bless his heart, still thinks a stock is something you boil for soup. He just liked seeing the numbers go up in the retirement account. I was the one making them go up. I was reliable. I was the steady hand. And in their eyes, I think steady had just become old, and old had become in the way. The whole thing started, as these stories often do, with whispers. It was the week of my 68th birthday. Richard was being attentive, overly so. He'd pat my shoulder as he passed, call me dear in a way that sounded like he was practicing it. Brenda, who usually only spoke to me to ask what I was planning to do with my mother's china, suddenly started calling just to check in. They were thick as thieves, the two of them, and my son Mark just drifted along in their wake like a plastic bag caught in an eddy. "We have a wonderful birthday surprise for you, Mom," Mark had said over dinner the Sunday before. Brenda was vibrating next to him, her smile stretched so tight I thought it might snap. "Oh, Martha, you are going to love it. It's a getaway." Richard just sat at the head of the table, beaming like he just invented electricity. "We really put our heads together on this one, honey. You deserve a break." A break. That's what they called it. The morning of my birthday, a pristine white shuttle bus pulled up to the curb. Not a limo, not a town car, a shuttle bus, the kind with grab rails and a wheelchair lift. The side of it read, Willow Creek Estates, Active Senior Living. "Don't mind the name," Brenda said, grabbing my elbow a little too firmly. "It's just the guest house shuttle. They run tours." "A tour?" I said, looking at Richard. "Of an old folks' home? That's my birthday present?" "It's not an old folks' home, Martha," Richard huffed, suddenly sounding defensive. "It's a lifestyle community. It's lovely. We just want you to see it. Just to have a look. Maybe you'll like it." My stomach did a slow, cold turn. For what? For the future, Mom. Just planning. It's smart. Against my better judgment, I got on the bus. The tour was about 2 hours away, upstate, where the leaves were turning. It was a beautiful drive, I suppose, if you weren't feeling like you were being driven to your own execution. The whole ride, the three of them kept up a relentless, cheerful chatter. They talked about the amenities, the community, the on-site medical care. They talked about everything but me. I just sat there, my good handbag in my lap, and I watched my husband of 45 years. I watched the way his eyes slid past mine. I watched the way my son nervously picked at a cuticle. I watched the predatory glint in Brenda's eyes. They thought I was a fool. They thought I was a gentle, slightly dotty old woman who wouldn't put up a fuss. They forgot who balanced their books for 2 decades. They forgot who taught Mark how to read. They forgot me. And just when he thought he had me cornered, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stay with me, because you'll be interested to see how it all ends. We pulled up to Willow Creek Estates, and I'll give them this. It was beautiful. It looked like a New England resort. Manicured lawns, a lovely brick facade, a smiling woman in a polo shirt waiting at the door. "Welcome, welcome," she chirped. Let's call her Patty. Patty had that brand of toxic positivity that makes you want to check your fillings. We are so excited to have you, Martha. She knew my name. That was the second red flag. They ushered me inside. It was all polished wood and soft lighting. A few residents were playing bridge in a sunroom. It was nice. Frighteningly nice. Patty is going to show you around your new home, Brenda said, squeezing my arm. My what? The suite, Mom, Mark corrected, his face pale. The suite she's showing you. The tour was a blur. Patty showed me the dining hall, 3 chef-prepared meals a day. The activity center, our watercolor class is very popular. And finally, a 1-bedroom apartment. It was perfectly fine. It had a small kitchenette and a large, accessible bathroom. It smelled like fresh paint and pine cleaner. And here's the best part, Patty said, walking over to the window. You have a lovely view of the gazebo. It's nice, I said, my voice flat. I could feel the trap closing. Richard, Mark, can I speak to you in the hall for a moment? Now, Mom, Mark started. Just a second, Martha, Richard said, putting on his patient voice. Let Patty finish. And that's when Patty, bless her little polo-shirted heart, delivered the killing blow. Oh, don't you worry your pretty head, Martha, she said, patting my arm. Your husband and son have taken care of everything. The deposit is paid, the first month's rent is all settled, and your belongings from the storage unit will be here this afternoon. We just need you to sign the final residency agreement. The silence in that room was so total, I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. I looked at Richard. His face was blotchy and red. I looked at Mark. He was staring at his shoes, the absolute coward. I looked at Brenda. She was smiling. A small, tight, victorious smile. They had planned this. They had gone through my things, packed up what they thought I would need, and put it in storage. They had brought me here on my birthday, not for a tour, but for an admission. They were going to sign me in, pat me on the head, and drive away. I felt cold. It wasn't panic. It wasn't even sadness. Not yet. It was a clear, sharp, diamond-hard rage. It focused my mind like nothing else. Patty, I said, my voice sweet as saccharine, you mentioned this suite has Wi-Fi? What's the speed here? I do a lot of investing online, and I need a high-speed, secure connection. And what about the business center? Do you have private offices? I'll need one for my tax preparations. Patty blinked. Oh, well, we have a computer lab, and the Wi-Fi it's fine for email. And the residency agreement, I continued, walking past her into the hall. I'll need my lawyer to review that. Can you have a copy messengered to his office in the city? I can give you his number. Lawyer? Richard sputtered, following me. Martha, what are you doing? It's all standard. It's never standard, honey, I said, still smiling. Brenda, dear, you're in real estate. You should know that. Brenda's smile flickered. Martha, don't be difficult. This is a good place. We did this for you. You did you? I said. I looked down the hall. I saw the shuttle bus, our shuttle bus, pulling away from the front entrance. They must have told the driver to leave at a set time. They were going to leave me here, stranded. Oh, look, I said, pointing. Our ride is leaving. Richard and Mark spun around. Their faces. Oh, Lord, I will treasure the memory of their faces. Pure, unadulterated panic. They ran down the hall, shoving past a man with a walker, shouting for the driver to stop. Brenda, in her ridiculous heels, was right behind them. I watched them go. Then I turned back to the reception desk. Patty was standing there, looking utterly confused. Are you staying, Mrs.? She asked. I smiled. A real smile, this time. No, I'm just seeing who invited me here. I walked out the front doors into the crisp autumn air.
I pulled out my phone, not the one they had forgotten in the car. I'm 68, not an idiot. I keep my old smartphone in my coat pocket, charged and ready. I use it for my audiobooks and as an emergency backup. I'd already called a local car service from the powder room while Patty was showing off the accessible shower. As I stepped into the warm black sedan, I looked back. Richard, Mark, and Brenda were standing on the curb, watching the shuttle disappear down the long tree-lined drive. They were 2 hours from home, they had no car, and, as I knew from doing the books, Richard's credit card was maxed out from a business expense I had yet to inquire about. Brenda's phone was, I knew, perpetually at 10% battery. They were stranded.
"Where to, ma'am?" the driver asked. "Home," I said. And finally, I went home. Alone, but home. The locks would be changed before they even found a signal. The drive home was glorious. The autumn leaves blurred past, a kaleidoscope of reds and golds, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly alive. The anger was still a cold knot in my stomach, but it was overshadowed by a fierce, exhilarating sense of freedom. They thought they could discard me. They thought I was so easily put out to pasture. Honey, this pasture just installed an electric fence. I called my friend Carol on the way. Carol has been my rock since we were knee-high to a grasshopper. We've been through everything together. Bad perms, good marriages, terrible divorces, and even worse, children. She picked up on the second ring. "Martha, honey, how's the birthday girl? Did Richard finally get you that little convertible you've been eyeing?" "Oh, Carol," I said, a laugh bubbling up. "You are not gonna believe the birthday present they got me." I recounted the whole sordid tale, from the shuttle bus to Patty's cheerful pronouncement to their faces as the bus pulled away. Carol was silent for a moment, then let out a whoop. "You go, girl. Left them stranded, did you? That's my Martha. I always said you had a steel spine wrapped in velvet." "Well, the velvet's getting a bit threadbare, but the steel is shining right through," I said. "Now, I need your help. I need a locksmith, a good one, and I need him now." By the time I pulled into my driveway, about an hour later, the locksmith was already there, a friendly young man named Mike. Carol had wasted no time. I paid him handsomely to rekey every lock on the house, including the shed and the back gate. I also had him install a deadbolt on my bedroom door, just for good measure. As Mike worked, I walked through my house. My house. The one I had decorated, I had maintained, I had paid for the upgrades on. Every stick of furniture, every painting on the wall held a memory. Richard might have built the addition, but I had made it a home. And they thought they could just pack me off to a lifestyle community and take it from me? Not on my watch. By the time the last lock clicked into place, it was getting dark. Mike wished me a good evening, and I stood in my living room, alone again. The silence was deafening, but it wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. It was mine. Then I got to work. First, I changed all the Wi-Fi passwords. Then I changed the passwords to all our joint online accounts, banking, investments, utilities. I made sure to lock Richard out of anything he could access. He wouldn't even be able to pay for that maxed out credit card. That would be a fun surprise for him. Then I started gathering all their things. Richard's golf clubs, his ridiculous collection of Hawaiian shirts, and his worn-out fishing gear all went into sturdy plastic bins. Mark's old report cards, his Little League trophies, the awful ceramic mug Brenda had made me for Mother's Day, into another set of bins. I wasn't being malicious, I was being efficient. If they thought I was going to be living in Willow Creek, they clearly didn't need their personal effects cluttering my home. I called a local moving company. "I need some things picked up and delivered to a new address," I explained. "It's an emergency. Can you come first thing tomorrow morning?" They could. Money talks, even on short notice. I worked late into the night, fueled by strong coffee and a sense of purpose. Every item I packed, every account I secured, felt like another brick in the wall I was building around myself. I wasn't just protecting my assets, I was protecting my sanity. Around midnight, my phone rang. It was Mark. I let it go to voicemail. Then Richard called. Same treatment.
Then Brenda, she left a nasty message, something about ungrateful and selfish and you'll regret this. I just smiled. Regret? Darling, I was just getting started. The next morning, the movers arrived. I pointed them to the carefully labeled bins in the garage. These are going to my son's house, I explained. Just drop them on the driveway. He knows they're coming. I specifically didn't mention Richard. Let them figure that out. As the moving truck pulled away, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. It was the feeling of shedding dead weight. Now, you might be thinking, Martha, that's a bit harsh, isn't it? He's your husband. And you'd be right. It was harsh. But what they did was more than harsh. It was a fundamental betrayal. It was an attempt to erase me, to make me disappear so they could carve up my life like a Thanksgiving turkey. I wasn't just reacting. I was responding in kind. I was playing by their rules. I knew this was hard to hear, but it's important. The truth was about to come out, and it would be glorious.
My first order of business was to call my lawyer, old Mr. Henderson. He's been handling my affairs since I was a young woman, and he knows a thing or two about messy situations. He was also the one who drafted our prenuptial agreement. Yes, even in the 70s, smart women had them, which, blessedly, protected my assets acquired before marriage. More importantly, I had a separate, ironclad will and trust in place, detailing exactly what would happen to my money and my home. Richard knew about the will, of course, but he'd always assumed he was the primary beneficiary. He was about to get a very rude awakening. "Martha, my dear," Mr. Henderson said, his voice crackling over the phone, "to what do I owe the pleasure? Not another zoning dispute with the new neighbors, I hope?" "Worse, Mr. Henderson. Much, much worse," I said, and proceeded to tell him the whole story. I heard him huffing and puffing on the other end, which for Mr. Henderson was the equivalent of shouting from the rooftops. "The gall! The unmitigated gall!" he exclaimed. "Attempted elder abandonment? This is scandalous! Martha, my dear, you've handled this with remarkable composure." "I have my moments," I said, dryly. "Now, what are my options? I want Richard out, permanently, and I want to make sure he gets absolutely nothing more than what he's legally entitled to, which, given his recent business expenses, I suspect isn't much." Mr. Henderson promised to start drafting divorce papers immediately. We also discussed the legality of changing the locks and moving Richard's belongings. He assured me that, given the circumstances of their attempt to have me involuntarily committed, which is essentially what they tried to do, I was well within my rights to secure my property. I also called my investment advisor. I had accounts Richard didn't even know existed, separate from the joint ones I'd managed for us. Accounts I'd been quietly funding for years, just in case. Call it instinct, call it good sense, but I had always believed in having a go-to-hell fund. And now it was time to put it to good use. "Martha," my advisor said, "I just saw a rather large, unauthorized withdrawal request come through on the joint account from Richard's login." My heart gave a sharp, triumphant beat. I said, "Deny it, and then freeze the account, all of them. Anything under Richard's name or a joint name that he can access. Only I am authorized to make withdrawals from now on." "Consider it done," he said, a note of surprise in his voice. "Is everything all right, Martha?" "Everything," I said, looking out at my peaceful garden, "is about to be much, much better." He was going to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. Don't go anywhere. The next few days were a blur of phone calls and legal documents. Mr. Henderson was a whirlwind, and I was grateful for his steady hand. I filed for divorce on grounds of cruel and inhumane treatment, citing the attempted guesthouse tour as the primary evidence. My case was strong, bolstered by Patty's cheerful, unwitting testimony that they had paid the deposit and first month's rent. The legal papers were served to Richard at Mark and Brenda's house, which, I admit, gave me a considerable amount of satisfaction.
The reaction was, as expected, apocalyptic. My phone exploded with calls from Richard, Mark, and Brenda. I let them all go to voicemail. Richard's messages started with furious demands. "Martha, in what God's name are you doing?" And slowly devolved into pleading. "Honey, please, let's talk about this." Mark's were whiny and guilt-ridden. "Mom, this isn't fair." And Brenda's were just pure venom. I deleted them all without listening to the end. I wasn't interested in their excuses or their manipulations. I focused on myself. I rediscovered hobbies I'd let slide. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since before Mark was born. I joined a book club. I even started taking long walks in the park, enjoying the autumn air, something I rarely did when I was busy managing Richard's life. One afternoon, about a week after the incident, I was in my garden pruning my roses. There was a frantic banging on the front door. I ignored it. It continued. I kept pruning. Finally, it stopped. A few minutes later, I heard yelling from the front of the house. It was Richard, Mark, and Brenda. They were standing on my porch, Richard red-faced and pounding on the door, Mark wringing his hands, and Brenda shrieking into her phone, which was, of course, dead. They looked disheveled, like they'd been sleeping in their clothes.
I watched them through my kitchen window, sipping a cup of tea. It was a beautiful view. "Martha, open this door," Richard bellowed. "This is my house, too." I walked over to the window, opened it just a crack, and called out sweetly, "I don't think so, darling. The divorce papers say otherwise, and Mr. Henderson will be in touch about retrieving your personal effects." "My personal effects?" Richard roared. "Where are my golf clubs? My suits?" "In Mark's driveway last I checked," I replied. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a watercolor class." I closed the window gently and went back to my tea. They continued to yell and pound for a while, but eventually they gave up. I watched them trudge away, defeated, down the street. It was a rather satisfying sight. The divorce proceedings, as Mr. Henderson predicted, were swift. Richard had no legal leg to stand on. His attempt to have me placed in a senior living facility against my will, coupled with his financial mismanagement of the joint accounts, which I had meticulously documented over the years, painted a very clear picture for the judge. He was awarded a meager settlement, precisely what the prenuptial agreement allowed him, and absolutely nothing from my personal investments or the house. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with a kindly but firm demeanor, even issued a restraining order, preventing Richard, Mark, and Brenda from contacting me directly. They had wanted to give me a guest house tour. Instead, they got a one-way ticket to financial ruin and social ostracization. And I got my life back. So, where was I? Yes, I was a free woman. And they were a mess, huddled together in Mark and Brenda's sad little townhouse, probably trying to figure out how to use a microwave. The divorce was done, the house was mine, and the restraining order was my new favorite accessory. But when you're married to someone for 45 years, even when they turn out to be a snake, you don't just stop. Not all at once. My life had been wrapped up in Richard's, his business, his schedule, his everything. And now that the storm had passed, I was left in the quiet. And the quiet was, frankly, a little boring. My watercolor class was lovely, but it was only on Tuesdays. The first ripple in the new calm pond came, as it always does, at the grocery store. I ran into Barb, a woman from our old neighborhood association, and Martha, dear. She grabbed my arm, her voice dripping with that fake pity that people love so much. I heard the dreadful news about you and Richard. It's just awful. These men, they just, he found someone younger, didn't he?
I just looked at her, smiled my sweet Sunday best smile, and patted her hand. Oh, Barb, bless your heart. No, it wasn't anything nearly so common. He and Brenda, my daughter-in-law, tried to have me committed to a senior home on my birthday so they could sell my house. You have never seen a jaw drop so fast. I mean, it nearly hit the linoleum. What? She squeaked. Oh, yes. Took me on a tour, paid the deposit, and tried to strand me there. I had to call a car service to get home and had the locks changed. It was all very dramatic. I picked up a melon and tapped it. Anyway, the divorce is final. The judge was not amused. How are your grandkids? Barb just stammered. She couldn't get a word out. I smiled again, put the melon in my cart, and wheeled away. I tell you, that news spread through our community faster than a grass fire in August. By the end of the week, I was a local legend. I wasn't the poor, abandoned wife. I was the woman who got away. I was the one who had turned the tables. The phone calls I got were no longer, "Are you okay?" They were, "Martha, you are my hero." Brenda, I heard, was furious. She worked on commission as a real estate agent in our area, but as it turns to, people don't really want to buy a $500,000 split level from a woman who tried to stick her mother-in-law in a home to steal her assets. Her reputation was in tatters. She was that Brenda. And Richard? Well, he was finding out that being the face of a company doesn't mean much when you're not allowed on the property and the brain has locked you out of the bank accounts. I knew it wasn't just about the house, though. It was about the money. And I still had that one nagging loose end, that business expense, that maxed out credit card. And oh, ladies, when I pulled that thread, the whole sweater unraveled.
I still had my old login for the business accounting software, the one Richard didn't know I had, separate from the main admin account. I'd set it up years ago as a backup, and in his arrogance, he'd never thought to change the deep-level permissions. I logged in, and oh my, the mess he had made in just a few weeks. It was like a toddler had gotten hold of a checkbook, but I wasn't there to look at the new damage. I was there for the old. I went back 3 months to that credit card statement, the one I'd set aside to ask him about. The charge was for $25,000. The vendor? Sunshine Villas, LLC. I'd never heard of them. I did a quick search online. Sunshine Villas was a brand new condo development. Tacky, prefabricated, zero lot line places about an hour south. And who was the listing agent for the development? I'll give you one guess. Brenda. My blood went cold. $25,000. That wasn't an expense. That was a down payment. I started digging, really digging. I cross-referenced dates, times, account numbers. I pulled up the separate savings account, the one I used to pay our quarterly taxes, and I found it. A series of transfers. Small at first, $500 here, $1,000 there, all moving from the tax account into a different account, an account I had never seen before. It wasn't our joint account. It wasn't my personal account. I did some more digging. It's amazing what you can find online when you have a man's social security number and his mother's maiden name. The account was at a different bank. It was a joint account in the names of Richard Gables and Brenda Gables. I had to sit down. I think I stopped breathing for a full minute. My son, Mark. Oh, my poor, stupid son. This wasn't just a plot to get rid of me. This was a plot to get rid of both of us. Brenda wasn't just my son's wife. She was my husband's partner. I know what you're thinking. Martha, he was having an affair. I thought so too at first. My stomach turned at the thought. The betrayal was so profound, so sleazy.
But as I looked at the numbers, at the methodical way they had been siphoning money for over a year, the truth was so much more twisted than a simple, sleazy affair. This wasn't about passion. This was about a hostile takeover. And they were about to find out what happens when you try to take over my company. You see, Richard's business, Gables Contracting, was an S-corp. I owned 49% of the shares. He owned 51%. But our marital agreement stated that in the event of a divorce, my 49% had to be bought out at fair market value. They weren't just trying to get rid of me. They were trying to bleed the company dry, tank its value, and leave me with 49% of nothing. They would have me in a home, Mark would be divorced because I guarantee Brenda was planning to dump him, and she and Richard would ride off into the sunset with all the assets, starting fresh in their tacky condo. The problem for them? They got caught, and the company's value hadn't tanked yet. I called Mr. Henderson. "Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice shaking with a rage so cold it could freeze fire, "I have a new development. It appears my husband and daughter-in-law have been committing wire fraud and embezzlement, and I have the receipts." The next phase of a legal battle wasn't a divorce. It was a demolition. Mr. Henderson brought in a forensic accountant, but honestly, I'd done most of the work. We had them dead to rights. We filed a civil suit against both Richard and Brenda for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. And then the phone calls started again. But this time, they weren't from Richard or Brenda. They were from suppliers. "Martha, it's Jim from Coastal Lumber. Listen, I don't know what's going on, but Richard's last check bounced. I'm out 20 grand. Martha, it's Sal's Plumbing. He's missed payroll for his crew. The guys are walking off the job. Without me there to manage the cash flow, to juggle the payables and receivables, to, run the business, Richard was exposed for what he truly was, an empty suit. He didn't know how to bid a job, how to pay his people, or how to order materials. He just knew how to play golf and cash the checks I made possible. The business didn't just fail. It imploded. It went into emergency receivership. The court-appointed trustee's first job was to liquidate the assets to pay the creditors. And what was the biggest asset? His 51% stake in the company.
And who, do you suppose, had just come into a rather large, unencumbered sum of money from her various private investments and was waiting with a very low, very reasonable offer? I bought his 51% of his own bankrupt company for pennies on the dollar. I now owned 100% of Gables Contracting, and all of its debts, yes, but more importantly, all of its assets, its equipment, and its reputation, which I could now rebuild. Richard was left with nothing, less than nothing. He was personally liable for the bouncing checks, for the missed payroll. And Brenda? She was named as a co-conspirator in the fraud suit. Her real estate license was suspended, pending investigation. The last I heard, they were all three of them, Richard, Brenda, and my poor blind son, Mark, still living in that tiny 2-bedroom townhouse with one bathroom, trying to figure out how to pay the electric bill. They'd lost their jobs, their reputations, and their savings. They wanted to put me in a guest house. Instead, they ended up in a prison of their own making. And I was just getting started. So there I was, Martha Gables, 68 years old, newly single, and the 100% owner of a construction company that was, to put it politely, circling the drain. The good news was, I knew exactly where all the bodies were buried. Metaphorically, of course. I had been the one doing the books for 40 years. The bad news, Richard had left a trail of bounced checks, angry subcontractors, and half-finished jobs that was a mile long. My first day as the boss was interesting. I walked into the main office, which I hadn't visited in years, preferring my quiet setup at home. The staff, a handful of project managers and a very stressed-out receptionist named Sandy, looked at me like I was a ghost. They were used to Richard, all bluster and cigars. They got me in a sensible tweed blazer, carrying a ledger and a thermos of my own coffee. "Good morning," I said, my voice carrying across the silent room. "My name is Martha Gables. As of yesterday, I am the sole proprietor of this company. I know you've all been through a transition. I know checks have bounced. I know payroll is late." A big, burly guy in the back, one of the foremen, grumbled, "So what are you gonna do about it, lady? We got families to feed." I looked him right in the eye. "What's your name?" "Sal," he said. "From Sal's Plumbing. Richard owes me 30 grand. I nodded. "Sal, I remember. You're right, he does. And he left this place a mess. But I've the one paying your invoices for 25 years, haven't I? I haven't ever shorted you." "Well, no. You were always square." "Exactly. So here's the deal." I walked to the front of the room. "I have just secured a new line of credit for this business, backed by my own assets, not Richard's. Your payroll, including back pay, will be direct deposited by 5 o'clock today. Sal, Jim, all of you with outstanding invoices, I'm going to pay you. It'll be a payment plan, but you will get every last dime. In return, I need you to finish the jobs you started. We're going to make this company whole again." I spent the next 2 weeks on the phone, day and night. I called every supplier. I visited every job site. I negotiated with the bank. I didn't sweet-talk them. I didn't beg. I just laid out the facts. I showed them the numbers. I showed them my plan. And you know what? It worked. The men who respected Richard's title but hated his everything, they respected my work. They saw I wasn't afraid to get my hands dirty, or at least my spreadsheets. We started finishing jobs. We started getting paid. We clawed our way back from the brink, 1 2x4 at a time. Gable's Contracting was becoming Martha's company, and it was becoming solvent. I was busy. I was thriving. I was, for the first time in my life, truly in charge. I've almost managed to put the unholy trinity of Richard, Brenda, and Mark out of my mind. I had rebuilt my business, but my family was still a wreck. And then, one rainy Tuesday, the wreck washed up on my doorstep. You'll want to hear this. I was balancing the new quarter's projections when my doorbell rang. Not the frantic pounding of a few weeks ago, but a weak, hesitant tap, tap, tap. I looked at my new security camera feed. It was Mark, my son, my only child. He looked awful. He was thin, pale, and unshaven. He was wearing the same wrinkled polo shirt I'd seen him in a week ago. My heart did a stupid little lurch. That's the curse of being a mother, isn't it? Even when they betray you, the first instinct is to hand them a sandwich. I put the deadbolt on. I opened the door exactly 4 inches. "Hello, Mark," I said. My voice was calm, not cold, just neutral. "Mom," he looked like he was about to cry. "Mom, please, can I just talk to you? Please?"
"You have 60 seconds, I said, and you're staying on the porch. The restraining order applies to you, too." "Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't know what they were really doing. I mean, I knew, but I didn't know. Brenda, she gets in your head. And Dad, he just went along with it." "You're blaming them," I said. It wasn't a question. "You, a 40-year-old man, are blaming your wife and your father. You stood right there in that room, Mark. You watched them try to lock me away. You didn't say a word. I know. He was openly sobbing now. Big, gasping, ugly cries. I'm a coward, Mom. I've always been a coward, but I'm paying for it. Brenda, she's a monster. She cleaned out our bank account, Mom. The one I had, she took it all. She's trying to file for divorce and say I was the one who conspired with Dad so she can get the house. And Dad? Dad's useless. He just sits on the couch all day, drinking and yelling at me about how I'm not handling her. That sounds, I said, like a you problem, Mark. What do you want from me? Money? Because the answer is no. No. Well, yes. I mean, I don't know. I have nowhere to go. I wanted to warn you. It's worse than you think. Worse than embezzlement, fraud, and attempted elder abandonment? Do tell. He looked around, as if Brenda herself might pop out of the azalea bushes. He leaned in, his voice a hoarse whisper. It wasn't just about the money, Mom. It was about you, specifically. Brenda, she found those papers from your doctor, from when you had that spell. My blood turned to ice. What spell? I said, my voice dropping. After Aunt Mary died, you were forgetful. You were depressed. You told me you thought you were, losing it. And you went to that specialist, the neurologist. I hadn't thought about that in years. It was right after my sister died. I was drowning in grief. I had been forgetful. I'd misplaced my keys. I'd missed an appointment. I was scared, so I had a full workup. The diagnosis? Grief. Severe but normal grief. And a vitamin B12 deficiency. I took my vitamins. I went to a grief counselor, and within 6 months, I was my old self. What about it, Mark? Brenda found the file when she was organizing your office. She told Dad, and that's when they started planning. They weren't just going to put you in Willow Creek, Mom. He wiped his nose on his sleeve. They were going to use that file. They had an appointment with a judge. They were going to get power of attorney. They were going to have you declared incompetent. The porch beneath my feet seemed to sway. Incompetent. It wasn't just out of the way. It was an erasure. They were going to take my name, my voice, my signature, my mind. They would have controlled everything. The guest house wasn't the end. It was just the kennel they'd keep me in while they did it. They hadn't just tried to steal from me. They had been planning to erase me. And they had a very specific, very cruel way of doing it. Stick with me, because the final piece of this puzzle is a stunner. Get off my porch, I said. My voice was so quiet he barely heard me. Mom, please, I said, get off my porch. I slammed the door. I locked the deadbolt, and I leaned against the solid oak, my heart hammering against my ribs. Incompetent. That was the word, the key to the whole thing. It explained the speed. It explained the cruelty. It wasn't a clumsy, greedy grab. It was a calculated, vicious legal execution. I was shaking, not with fear, with a rage so pure and so profound it was almost clarifying. They hadn't just underestimated my intelligence. They had tried to legally annihilate it. I went back to my desk, but I didn't look at the company's books. I logged into my personal email, and I searched. I searched for neurologist. I searched for Mary, and I found it. The email chain with the specialist from 5 years ago. I'd forwarded the final report to one person for safekeeping, just so someone else would have a record of my clean bill of health.
I had forwarded it to Richard. He had known. He had known I was perfectly healthy. He had kept that report, and he and that vulture had decided to twist it, to use my most vulnerable moment, my deepest grief, as their primary weapon. I picked up the phone. "Mr. Henderson," I said, "I have one more thing to add to the civil suit. I believe the word is premeditation." I had them. Oh, I had them. The fraud case was strong, but this was ironclad. This was malicious. This was the kind of thing that doesn't just lose you a lawsuit, it loses you your soul. And as I sat there, a new plan began to form, a final, beautiful, and perfectly legal birthday present for all three of them. I wasn't just going to win. I was going to salt the earth. They thought they wanted my house. They thought they wanted my money.
Fine. I was going to make sure they got exactly what they deserved. I slammed that door on my own son, and I leaned against it, and I let myself feel it. All of it. Not just the anger, but the insult. To try and have me declared incompetent. To use my grief for my sister as a weapon. This was a new low, even for them. This wasn't a crime of passion. This wasn't a mistake. This was a cold, calculated, premeditated assassination of my character, my mind, and my freedom. They weren't just trying to get rid of me. They were trying to unperson me. I walked straight to my computer, my hand steady. I opened that email, the one from 5 years ago. "Martha, great news," my neurologist had written. "All tests came back clear. Your cognitive function is in the 99th percentile for your age group. You are suffering from acute grief and a B12 deficiency. I'm prescribing a supplement and strongly recommend the grief counselor we discussed. You are perfectly healthy." And right below it, my own sent message. "Richard, darling, wonderful news from the doctor. See attached. I'm not losing my mind, just my B12. Love, M." I printed them both, the report, the email. I put them in a crisp, clear sheet protector. My next call was to Mr. Henderson. When I told him, the silence on the other end of the line was so total, I thought he'd had a heart attack. "Mr. Henderson, are you there?" "I am here, Martha," he finally said, his voice a low growl I had never heard from him. "I am processing. This is no longer a civil suit for fraud. This is conspiracy. This is malicious prosecution. This is evil, Martha, and we are going to use it to bury them." The legal wheels, which had been grinding, now began to scream. Mr. Henderson filed an emergency motion, adding the new evidence. He requested a mandatory settlement conference presided over by a judge, and he subpoenaed all three of them, Richard, Brenda, and Mark. He also, bless his strategic heart, sent a copy of the new filing to the district attorney's office, along with a concerned citizen letter about potential criminal elder abuse and perjury. The conference was set for 2 weeks later. In that time, I didn't hide, I didn't cower. I went to my watercolor class, I ran my company, I had lunch with my friends. I lived my life loudly and visibly. I wanted them to see me. I wanted them to see the incompetent old woman who was running a 6-figure business, balancing payroll, and looking fabulous in a new fall coat. The day of the conference, I chose my outfit with care. A sharp navy blue suit, a cream-colored silk blouse, my mother's pearls. I looked like the chairwoman of the board, which, in effect, I was. We met in a Solis conference room at the courthouse. Me and Mr. Henderson on one side, Richard, Brenda, and Mark on the other. They looked like they had been living in a shoebox with a wolverine. Richard's suit was rumpled and he had lost weight. His face was a pasty gray. Brenda was all sharp edges and nervous tics, her cheap acrylic nails tapping a frantic rhythm on the table. And Mark just looked like a balloon that had been left in a corner for a month, deflated, saggy, and sad. They had one lawyer between them, a young, slick-looking public defender who clearly wished he were anywhere else. The judge, the same no-nonsense woman from my divorce, entered. "Good morning.
I have read the filings. Mr. Henderson, you've made some startling new allegations. Let's see if we can resolve this before it goes to a trial that I suspect none of you," she stared hard at Richard and Brenda, "truly want. Mr. Henderson, your floor." Mr. Henderson stood up. He was a small man, but he seemed to take up all the air in the room. He laid out the case, piece by piece. The systematic embezzlement from the Gables contract tax account, the secret joint bank account in Richard and Brenda's names, the $25,000 wire transfer for the condo down payment, the bounced checks, the ruined credit, the defunct company. Brenda's lawyer kept interrupting. "It's a marital dispute. It's a business disagreement. My clients assert that Miss Gables mismanaged the company for years." I sat there watching them squirm. They thought they had buried the truth, but I'm a gardener and I know how to dig things up. And what I found was rotten to the core. Don't go anywhere because you'll want to see the look on their faces. Mr. Henderson let him finish. Then he smiled, a thin reptilian smile. "Your Honor, that is the financial portion of the complaint. Now we move to the intent. My client isn't just seeking repayment. She is seeking punitive damages for conspiracy, malicious intent, and attempted elder fraud." "Objection!" the young lawyer yelped. "There is no proof of any of that."
"Proof," Mr. Henderson said, his voice soft. He walked over to the table and placed a single file in front of them. Exhibit A, a complete neurological workup for my client from 5 years ago, stating she is in perfect cognitive health. Brenda's eyes widened. She recognized it. And Exhibit B, he placed my printed email on top of it. An email forwarding this exact report to Mr. Richard Gables, proving he had full knowledge of her clean bill of health. I watched Richard, all the color drained from his face. He looked at the email, he looked at me. And for the first time I saw it. Not anger, not greed, just pure, unadulterated terror. He knew he was caught. Brenda snatched the paper. She read it, and her face, her smug, awful face, just crumbled. She looked at Richard. You told me she was losing it. You told me it was a for-show report, you idiot." "Quiet," their lawyer hissed. "No," she shrieked, pointing at Richard. "He was in on it with me. And then he was in on it with Mark. He was playing us both. He told me we'd dump Mark, and he told Mark we'd—" "That is quite enough," the judge boomed. The room went dead silent. The young lawyer put his head in his hands. He knew, we all knew, it was over. "Mr. Henderson," the judge said, "what does your client want?" "My client," Mr. Henderson said, "has already lost her husband and her son. She has had her business driven into the ground, and she has had her very sanity used as a weapon against her. She wants justice. We are filing for $3 million in punitive damages." "We don't have 3 cents, Richard whispered, his voice cracking. "We know," Mr. Henderson said. "The DA's office is also very interested in this case. Perjury is a serious crime. So is conspiracy to commit fraud." Brenda started to hyperventilate. "However," Mr. Henderson continued, "my client is a practical woman. She is willing to settle this matter civilly today under the following conditions." He laid out the terms. Full written confessions from both Richard and Brenda, detailing the embezzlement and the plot to have me declared incompetent, to be held by Mr. Henderson in escrow. Should they ever speak my name in public or attempt to contact me again, those confessions go straight to the DA. They will sign over any and all assets they have remaining. This included the $25,000 down payment on the Sunshine Villas condo, which would be returned to me immediately as partial repayment. Richard will forfeit any and all rights to his Social Security or any other marital-derived benefit. They will agree to a permanent lifetime restraining order, all 3 of them. Their lawyer just nodded, scribbling furiously. And Mark?" he asked, pointing at my son who hadn't said a word. I looked at Mark, my son. He was crying silently, tears just rolling down his cheeks. He was a coward, yes, but he was also a victim. A stupid, willing victim, but a victim nonetheless. "Mark," I said, my voice clear, "you are named in this restraining order,
but you are not named in the civil suit." He looked up, his eyes full of a desperate, pathetic hope. I said, "You have a choice. You can stay with them in that little pit they've dug for you, or you can sign this restraining order, walk out of this room, and never, ever see any of us again. Start over. Be a man for once in your life. The choice is yours." He looked at me, he looked at his father, he looked at his wife who was glaring at him with pure hatred. He stood up, his chair scraping the floor. "I'll sign it," he whispered. He walked to our side of the table, signed the paper Mr. Henderson gave him, and without looking back, he walked out of the conference room, and I have never seen or heard from him again. Brenda and Richard were left alone. They had no choice. They signed everything. The judge looked at them. "You two," she said, her voice dripping with contempt, "are a disgrace. The settlement is so ordered. Mr. Gables, Ms. Gables, I strongly suggest you find a new town to live in. This one is no longer yours." I walked out of that courthouse and took my first deep breath of clean, free air. It's been a year now. Gables Contracting is now Gables and Daughter. Though my daughter is just Sandy, the receptionist I promoted to general manager. She's got a brilliant head for business. We're turning a profit, we're hiring, we're thriving. My house is quiet. It's filled with my paintings, my books, and the smell of my own baking. Richard and Brenda? The last I heard, the bank foreclosed on the townhouse. They were seen packing their things into a U-Haul. Their fraud, coupled with their confessions, meant they were uninsurable, unemployable. They lost everything. Their Sunshine Villa became my paid-off-the-business loan fund. They tried to give me a one-way ticket to a guest house. They tried to erase me. Instead, I erased them. I took back my name, my money, my company, and my life. They thought I was old and weak and incompetent. They forgot who I was. I'm Martha Gables, and I'm just getting started. And that's the whole story. They gave me a guest house tour for my birthday, and in return, I gave them a front-row seat to the rest of their miserable lives. So, tell me, what would you have done if you were me?
So, another story of my grandmother has ended. And be clicking here, you will have when more such stories.